Hey, everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, SuperBake. Let's talk about stuff. Hey, everyone. Well, I'm back. It's been a while since I've done this. I think my last episode was uploaded on August of last year. So, apologies for not communicating better. I had some personal stuff come up, some family stuff came up last year. So, I was dealing with that. And then my day job just got really busy. So, it got really difficult to keep up with that as well as the podcast at the same time. So I just needed to kind of take a break, take a step away from it for a little while. But now I plan on getting back into it and trying to stick to a more regular schedule for uploading. So right now I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I'm hoping to do most likely every other week, so every other Friday. So maybe about 2 episodes a month. I may do more, just kinda depends on how things go, depends on how my schedule looks with my job, but, I do plan on trying to get back into more of a regular release schedule, so look for more episodes coming out. But I did just wanna take this time to, 1, tell you about what I'm gonna be talking about in this episode tonight, and then also just kinda some things that I've been doing in the meantime. So let's talk about just, games that I've been playing since then, just because I like to talk about games on this podcast quite a bit. Played actually quite a few. I played Lies of P. I beat that game. Really enjoyed it. I actually also played the new Lords of the Fallen, so really enjoyed that game too. Actually played those two pretty much back to back, and two games that I actually enjoyed way more than I thought I was going to, especially Lords of the Fallen. I was pleasantly surprised by that game. Two Souls-like games. Very opposite interpretations from people. I know Lies of P was very well received. People really liked it, and I totally get why. After playing that game, I completely understand why it was so well received. Definitely one of the more difficult games that I've played in a long time. I actually got pretty frustrated and had to walk away from a while from that one. I think it was the swamp monster that I got stuck on. That bitch gave me a hard time, and I finally had to take a break, but came back, gave it another try. Ended up beating that game. Started New Game Plus, but didn't get too far because, man, that game gets really fucking tough in New Game Plus. Like, way more than I was expecting. Like, I got through the Parade Master and the robot police guy fine. I think it was like the second fight against the Black Rabbit Brotherhood that I got my ass kicked big time. And they were hard enough the first playthrough. I didn't have the patience for them on the second one. So I beat the game, so I'm happy with that. Lords of the Fallen, I was also very surprised by that game too. Again, same vein, it was a Souls-like game. I wasn't super keen on it just from the looks of it and what I'd heard, but I ended up playing it and actually I kind of liked it more than Lies of P in some ways. I played through it several times actually. I ended up liking that game a lot. I loved the mechanic of the umbral lamp going back and forth between the living world and the umbral world. That was a cool mechanic. I remember watching some review videos for it, and some of the things I had heard people say about it, yeah, a lot of it was pretty true or pretty accurate. There's a lot of enemies in that game. Sometimes they can be placed in areas where they feel kind of cheap. Like especially like there's one level where you're kind of on a cliffside and you're trying to run up the scaffolding and stuff, and there are moments where there are just tons of enemies all over the damn place, and they'll just knock your ass off, and it does get very frustrating after a while. But overall, I loved that game. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I did get it on sale though, so I would say if you can get it on sale for like 30 bucks or less, I would say then I would recommend it. Otherwise, maybe just kind of hold off for a little while. I don't know how much it goes for normally. I picked it up when it was on sale. So, and that's those are two games that I played. Late last year, early into 2025. Right now, I'm playing Alan Wake 2, and I'm absolutely loving it. I just got to the part where they do the Herald of Darkness song. One of the coolest moments in video games that I've experienced in a long time, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that. Like it was awesome. I mean, I knew about that scene. I knew it was coming, but even still, it was a very welcome surprise for me. I still liked it, or not surprise, but just really welcome, cool moment. As far as TV shows go, I've been watching the new season of Invincible, and I'm actually going to do a review for that here coming up here shortly. So you'll hear my thoughts on that. It's just going to be a general review of the season overall. It's not going to be episodic, so I'll go more into that in detail here shortly. I do plan on watching Reacher season 3 at some point. don't know if I'll do a review of that just because I didn't do a review of the first two seasons. As far as movies go, I haven't really gotten out to see too many movies lately. Haven't really gone to the theater very much in the last few months, but I do plan on trying to watch more movies. Uh, I had actually thought about doing a review of The Electric State starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. It seems like kind of low hanging fruit right now just because everybody else is doing reviews of it and just shitting on it big time. So I might just skip that one. But yeah, I mean, I'll probably do reviews and reactions to trailers and movies probably coming out here soon. But if I do, I'll keep you guys posted on it. Something else I'd like to do with a podcast as well is I don't think that I've ever actually reviewed too many like older movies. And that's something that I'd like to actually do. I'd like to go back and review like older movies and shows that I really appreciate. Like I know a while back I did a review of my top 10 horror films, and one of them was the movie Aliens, and that's one of my all time favorite movies. So I thought it'd be kind of cool maybe to do a review of that at some point, or maybe just other movies or TV shows or something like that. So, like, I love the show Venture Bros. I think I've talked about it on the podcast multiple times. So, I'd like to go back and maybe revisit that series. I've got the whole series on. I bought the DVD set for the complete series on, excuse me, Amazon. I plan on getting the movie too. So, who knows? I may do a review of that at some point, and maybe other shows and movies from the past that I really appreciate, but just never got around to discussing on here. So, who knows? I may try to do more of that. But yeah, movie wise, I haven't really seen a whole lot, but I'm going to try to get back into that, try to get back into the review process. The review coming up for Invincible may not be that great. It's been a minute since I've done these reviews, so, and it's kind of off the cuff, so forgive me if it's maybe not the best, maybe not the most concise review, but I just really wanted to get back into this, and I kind of figured if I keep beating around the bush and putting it off, I'm never going to do it. So this just seemed like a good time to try to get back into it, especially now that we're getting out of the winter months. I survived the winter. It was ridiculously cold at some point, at several points here in this winter. So definitely going to try to be better about uploading episodes. And then more than anything, I'm going to try to be better about just communicating if I take any more short-term hiatuses. But yeah, I'm glad to be back and tune in because my review of Invincible season three is coming up here shortly. So I guess I'll go ahead and get into my review for season three of Invincible. I think before when I did season two, I talked about each episode individually, or maybe two episodes at a time. It's been a while, so I don't remember. But I think I'm just going to give just a general brief review for the entire season, just give my thoughts on it, the story, the characters, how it ends, and how it sets up for the next season, and just my general thoughts on it. So, overall, with season three, I would say I liked it more than season two, but I still think season one of Invincible is probably the best. But I still really enjoyed season three. I know it's gotten some heat for like the animation not being that great. I don't know if I really was bothered by it that much. There were definitely some moments where I noticed the animation wasn't maybe up to par as much as it could have been. But I mean, overall, I didn't notice it too much. I did notice, though, I thought the animation was really good in the final episode. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, there were definitely moments where the animation dipped quite a bit. I think the running joke online was that there were scenes like where you would see characters and it looked like they would just take the image of the character and just shrink it down to try to simulate them moving away. So there's a little bit of that in this season. But I mean, overall, I still felt like it looked like Invincible. It wasn't too distracting, at least to me. And I'm the kind of person that really does kind of pay attention to animation quite a bit in shows. So I mean, I didn't really feel like it bothered me that much. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think from a writing perspective, season three of Invincible, it has a lot of stuff going on, and I think for the most part, it does a good job of balancing all the story beats pretty well. But I do think there are some pacing issues with the writing in the season that I kind of noticed. And I'll just kind of get into that. Oh, and of course, as always, spoilers. It's going to be hard to talk about this stuff without really, spoiling the main plot. But pretty much season three picks up, I think it's a few months after the ending of season two, where we saw Mark fight alongside his father Nolan against several Viltrumites. They give him an ultimatum that he is supposed to take over as the new Viltrumite controlling the Earth. And of course, Mark, being who he is not going to agree to that. So in season three, after the events that took place with Anissa showing up and basically kicking Mark's ass. Cecil has put Mark on this new, like, really intense training program to try to get him stronger and we've seen the end results of that. So it does seem like Mark is really trying to more and more move into the role of the new protector of the Earth. We kind of got to see him start to move into that role in season 2, but here it really does kind of feel like Mark is kind of becoming established as like kind of the unofficial like new defender of the Earth. Like you still have the Guardians of the Globe, they're still there and they still have, a great role in this season as well, particularly Rex Splode, who's become like one of my favorite characters in the show. But yeah, this it really does feel like we're seeing Mark become like a legit full-fledged superhero, especially in this season, which I really liked. I like Mark as a character in general, and I like seeing how he's grown into his own hero in Invincible. So that's been a cool thing to see develop throughout the 3 seasons so far that we've had in the show. And I just like the training regimen that he did with Cecil, like when he's trying to lift the ice block out of the ocean, when he's going into the lava to try to see how long he can take it. Like I like that they're training him on different aspects of his powers, like not just strength, but also his durability, his speed. They're trying to basically improve him in every way that he can be to get ready for the next Viltrumite invasion, which, I mean, it makes sense. If you've got a Viltrumite there and you know another Viltrumite's coming, you might as well try to get him as beefed up as you can. Similar in what we saw in parts of season 1 and 2, we get to see Mark go on various smaller adventures in this one, fighting other villains like the Mauler twins. They show up to cause trouble again in this season. But one big key difference is that we see Mark actually has kind of an unofficial sidekick, Oliver from season 2, who shows up, who also being half Viltrumite, but also in his situation, he's half Thraxan. His powers have manifested. So we kind of get an interesting reversal from season 1, where in that season, we got to see Nolan training Mark on how to use his powers. We get to see Mark kind of helping Oliver get used to his abilities as well, and even trying to train him on how to be a superhero, taking him to arts to get his costume, and then we even get to see Oliver in action when he takes on the Muller twins. And one thing that I love about Oliver's character is I love the moral conflict that he brings into the story. I don't know if this was intentional, but what I thought they were going to do with him, and I was kind of nervous about this at first, especially when he fought the Mauler twins. I thought Oliver was going to come in and be kind of like a psychopath, and be more like, well, not maybe not a psychopath, but be more of a Viltrumite like what Nolan was. And you kind of get a hint of that because he tries to kill the Mauler twins. Well, he kills them pretty much instantly. And he makes a compelling argument against Mark, like, hey, these guys are a threat. We should take them out so they can't keep doing this. And then Mark is trying to instill in him, like it's wrong to kill people. And you kind of see those different ideologies clash. So it's not too dissimilar from what we saw between Mark and Nolan from season 1. Except in this case, it's Mark is now the older one. He's the more experienced, mature one between the two. So that's an interesting reversal between these two ideologies. So I thought that was an interesting element in this season. And again, I think it kind of it helps show that Mark has matured as a character, not just physically but also emotionally. We see Mark in this season. I think they've been kind of setting this up throughout all 3 seasons so far, but I think especially in this season, we see Mark coming to terms with the fact that I think he has more of like a black and white view of the world. And I think now he's starting to see that it's a lot more nuanced than that. In season 1, for example, it's easy to look at Nolan as the villain of that season because of all the things that he did. And this is in no way um, okaying what Nolan did, killing all those people. But when you find out how the Viltrumites operate and how they think, there is kind of a it does kind of make sense. You kind of get it. Like, okay, he didn't kill the Guardians of the Globe because he was a sadistic lunatic. He did it because he was trying to do what he thought was best for the Viltrumite Empire. He saw them as a threat and he wanted to take them out. So it made sense. And so you kind of get that in this season too, where Mark is starting to see the world in as more gray rather than just straight black and white. Like, yes, there are the traditional villains like Doc Seismic, who actually becomes kind of a major threat in this season, which was unexpected. But then you've also got the villains in this that are they're bad, but they're not necessarily evil. They're just guys they just made bad decisions that put them down this path that they've had a hard time getting out of. There was this episode in the season where these two villains that we saw in season one that were helping Battle Beast, I don't remember their names, but the guy with the pink goo that came out of his chest to grab people like the tentacles, and then the other guy that was made of like lava. We actually got this nice little intro with them in this one episode where they're robbing a bank because they've come down on hard times. But you get the impression that they're not bad guys. They're just guys who they've had some bad luck financially and they're just doing what they have to do to survive. And the whole scene is done in silence. There's no sound whatsoever until Invincible shows up and apprehends them along with Oliver. And then suddenly the sound returns and we follow them on their little journey. It's like this 5-minute introduction, but it's a really powerful tool to kind of show like, yeah, these are people. They're not just, antagonists as they might put it in Venture Bros, but they're actually people. So the show, I think, does a good job of exploring that, trying to balance that out, and really trying to show that, like, yeah, the world isn't that simplistic. Like, you've got your protagonist and antagonist, but there's always this, like, in between, this gray area where you see characters who you would normally perceive as heroes who do some pretty messed up stuff, like Omni Man. So I think the show does a good job of exploring those ideas, especially with Mark, as we see his ideas about the world being challenged continuously, not just by villains, but also even by people who are close to him, like Oliver. Something else about the season that I really enjoy is I like that we finally get to see Mark and Adam Eve finally become a couple. And they really work too. Not just because they're both superheroes, but like they've kind of been building towards it a little bit throughout the 3 seasons so far. Like we kind of got hints that there was an attraction there in season one and as well as season two. I do like that Mark didn't just immediately ask her out in season two. I like that he waited until this season to do it. I will say, I mentioned this before about the pacing issues with this season. It would have been nice if we could have gotten maybe a couple of dates between those two before they officially hooked up. But I mean, overall, I think that their relationship it worked fine. I think that it was written pretty well in this season, and it was kind of funny that once again Mark kind of gets interrupted when he goes to the future to help those two guys out while him and Eve are on a date. But I did like that in this season he actually was willing to tell those guys to basically piss off, like I'm on a date, Whereas before I felt like he would not have done that. So that's an interesting change in his character that we've gotten to see too. Adam Eve as a character, I like as well. I think she's a good balance to Mark, not just because of her abilities, but also I just feel like personality wise, it feels like she balances Mark out really nicely. She does a good job of keeping him grounded as he constantly tries to grapple with his Viltrumite heritage, not knowing what happened to his father, and also trying to contend with the fact that there is this threat that the Viltrumites are going to come back and try to take over the earth again. So she's a nice counterbalance to that. Um, I like that other Guardians of the Globe, those characters, I like that those guys have gotten a bigger role in this, particularly Rex Splode, who has become, like I said before, one of, if not my favorite character in the show. Like, he is awesome. I love the development that he's gotten, the character arc that he's had. Like, I was genuinely scared when I thought they killed him off in season two. So when he came back in this and now he's had this big character growth, it was really cool to see. And honestly, the relationship between him and Shrinkray was pretty compelling. Kind of feel like it came a little bit out of nowhere, to be honest. But I mean, overall, I still think it worked. I thought that they had great chemistry. I love the scene where he actually tries to cook for her. That was a nice, sweet moment for him, kind of showing that he genuinely cares. Like, I just love what the show has done with his character. I mean, I never read the comic. I don't know if this is how he's developed in the comic as well, but from the show's perspective, I think he's been just fantastic. And he's always been great for levity. He always just has like the funniest lines in the show to me. Um, but yeah, like his character has been awesome. Like I think the show's done a really good job of handling most of the characters in the show. Um, I like the stuff with Alan and Nolan in the prison. We only got a little bit of that. That's actually one of my negatives about this season was that we really didn't get very much of Nolan. And we didn't get a lot of him in season two either. We really only get him in like what, one or two episodes, and then he's kind of just gone. And then this one we only get like I think one episode and not even the entire episode of him and Alan and Battle Beast breaking out of the Viltrumite prison. And I love Nolan as a character. I would argue he was one of the most compelling characters in season one. So it would have been nice if we could have gotten more of him in this one, but maybe, hopefully, season four we'll get more of that. It seems like they're kind of building up for him to have a bigger role in the story moving forward, especially with him and Alan kind of agreeing to work together. And Nolan, reveals to Alan that there's only like 50 Viltrumites left in the entire universe. So that was a big reveal. And he even says like this is how we can beat them. So to me, I took that to mean that okay, he's going to join up with them. He's going to help. So Hopefully, that's an indication that we're gonna get more of him in season 4, whenever that comes out, which I thought I read somewhere they're planning on trying to release that in 2026, so hopefully that'll happen. Seems like a pretty quick turnaround, but I guess we'll find out. But yeah, that's one aspect of the story I would have liked to have seen more of. Something else with the story too, and I think I touched on this when I mentioned the pacing before, but there are 3 major conflicts that are introduced towards the end of the season that I really felt like it might have been better if they focused on either 1 or 2 instead of all 3. And that is they introduced this villain named Powerplex, who's voiced by Aaron Paul, who plays him very well. And I loved this character because this shows the consequences of being a superhero, which is also something that I think Invincible as a whole has done a really good job of doing. It's revealed that Powerplex was there in, I think it was Chicago, when Nolan and Mark fought in season 1. He was there when Mark was knocked into the city and that building came tumbling down. And Powerplex's sister and niece, I believe, were in that building and they were killed in that battle. And he's held a grudge against Invincible ever since then. He's been trying to go through things the legitimate way, trying to go through the court system to try to go after him, but just nobody would help him, and he got frustrated. And basically, he works for the government organization that Cecil works for, and he's basically been stealing their technology, this like electrical current technology that he uses to amplify his electrical abilities, and he uses that to fight Invincible. And it makes for a really compelling battle in this show. Like you kind of get where the guy's coming from. Again, kind of like what I said before about morally gray characters, like with Nolan, for example. Like, yes, what Powerplex does is messed up, even though it is kind of by accident, but he's this tragic character and you kind of get where he's coming from. Like he's angry at Invincible and he sees Invincible as the villain. Again, kind of like the opposite of Invincible. He has this black and white view of superheroes. He sees Invincible as evil because Invincible was involved in this battle that killed people that Powerplex cares about. And that's all that he sees. But he doesn't understand that like the world is more gray than that and that Mark was really trying to protect them from the real threat, which was Nolan. But Powerplex just doesn't understand that. And that was a really cool, compelling moment in the story. And I would have liked to have seen that explored a bit more. And maybe it is in the comic, I don't know. I'm just going based on what I know from the show. But he's only in like 1 episode and then he's gone. And then the next episode, we get the Invincible War, where we get to see alternate versions of Mark from other dimensions show up. And then Mark, the Guardians of the Globe, and other superheroes that I don't remember if we were ever introduced to have to help fight these guys as well. I found out later one of these superheroes, I think his name is it Brit? I can't remember, but he's voiced by Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad. So we got Aaron Paul and Jonathan Banks. I almost didn't recognize his voice until I had to look it up. That's so funny to me that they got this guy, they got Jonathan Banks to play this one character, and then he's just kind of gone. But yeah, like that stuff was really awesome. Angstrom Levy shows up again. Mark takes him out. I say again, I don't want to sound annoyed. I like Levy as a villain, but I would have preferred that he kind of maybe they hold off on revealing him at least this season since he was already kind of the main villain in season 2, even though he isn't in a lot of it. It was cool to see the other marks show up. We were at least introduced to them in season 2, so we knew who they were from like the other versions of Angstrom Levy that had to deal with them. But at the same time, I don't know. I didn't like that we kind of went from Powerplex, who was a compelling villain, to now Angstrom Levy's back, but also these other versions of Mark are here. And so you've kind of got multiple villains that are showing up and wreaking havoc on the earth. And that stuff I didn't mind it. But again, from a pacing perspective, I think it could have been done maybe a little bit better. The whole thing is done over the course of like 1 episode. Now, I'll give the show some leeway here just because of the fact, like I said, the other Invincibles were introduced in the previous season, so we at least knew about their existence. We knew about the multiverse and all that, but even so, this feels like a big threat that should have taken most of the season to deal with. Even though these are weaker versions of Mark, it's revealed later, like they're still Viltrumites, basically. So it seems like if one Viltrumite is a huge threat, several of them, I think it's like 18, are introduced. That definitely seems like it should have been a pretty major threat that would have taken everything the Earth had to stop them. And they do it in like 1 episode. And it's all cool, it's all done very well, and it does lead to the tragic death of Rex Splode, which the guy went out like a badass, but it was legitimately sad. And we even got the funeral for Rex Splode, and yeah, I hated that he died. I mean, I'm glad he went out like a badass, but I hated that he sacrificed himself to take out one of the Invincibles. But yeah, like it clearly showed like that this was a serious threat when you take out one of the major members of the Guardians of the Globe. Also, I just got to say it, dude. The Immortal is like the joke of the show. I swear to God, that dude gets his head popped off like so much. It really is kind of becoming a running gag. I think I mentioned this when I did a review of season two. Yeah, he's becoming like just the. He, I feel like he's there to get his ass kicked. Like, even though before he's kind of introduced as sort of like the Earth's version of Superman without the Viltrumites, like he just gets his ass kicked so much. If the dude's not getting his head ripped off, he's not doing much of anything. Like, I like that he defended Mark in his battle against his evil version of Mark, but just the dude gets his head kicked off like almost immediately. But yeah, the Immortal and Kate, definitely not my two favorite characters in the season. I was not a big fan of them. They've gotten quite a bit of hate, I think, from a lot of fans, and I get it. I wasn't a huge fan of them either. But anyway, yeah, like Rex hated that he died, but I love that he went out like a badass. But then, as soon as we're done with the Invincible War, we are immediately, like I think at the end of that episode, we're introduced to the I guess the big threat of the season, which is Conquest, voiced by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who does a fantastic job of this villain. If I had to name a standout of this season, I think episode 8 is probably my favorite episode. I've seen, was it IGN? Somebody gave it a low score, and I completely disagree with this low score 100%. I will admit the final episode of season 3 could have been better paced, like a lot of the season as a whole, but overall, episode 8 I thought was the best episode, in my opinion. Like, I thought it was fantastic. I thought Conquest, the older, basically sadistic Viltrumite that shows up to fight Mark at the end, was a fantastic villain. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, to me, knocked it out of the park as this character. It felt like he was channeling like a lot of his character Negan from The Walking Dead, which I thought this was an interesting parallel. You see, it's basically Stephen Yoon, who plays Mark and also played Glenn in The Walking Dead, is now battling Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who played Negan in The Walking Dead. So it's an interesting switch there. But no, I mean, Conquest shows up and he is immediately a huge threat. Like, this dude's not fucking around. Number one, he's old, and as it's illustrated in with the Viltrumite race, the older they are, the slower they age, and it seems to be perceived the more powerful they are. I don't know where Conquest stacks up against Nolan. I thought I read somewhere that he's comparable to Nolan in terms of strength, maybe a little bit weaker, but yeah, either way, he shows up, and just from his battle scar, his jacked up teeth, and his robotic hand, it's pretty clear that this dude does not fuck around. He's here to kick ass, and he pretty much says he pretty much says as such when he's talking to Mark. And I think this fight did a great job of showing not just that Mark really has grown physically, like in terms of strength and speed, but also I think it's also shown this is a much more brutal version of Mark. This is not the same Mark that fought against Nolan. And it is an interesting parallel between this fight and the fight between Mark and Nolan in season 1. In the fight in season 1 when Mark fought Omni-Man, it was clear from the get-go that Mark was way out of his depth. He'd only had his powers for like what, maybe a few months at that point. So, and Nolan, you've got Nolan there who I don't know how old he is at that point. I would say probably at least a couple hundred, if not a couple thousand years old. He's an experienced Viltrumite. He's he's basically superior to Mark in every conceivable way: strength, speed, durability. He's got experience on his side. Like, Mark had no chance in that fight, and it was pretty clear. He only got like what, maybe 1, 2 punches on Nolan, and they did nothing. Nolan was basically slapping his ass across the planet like it was nothing. Like, this is different. Mark is on his own. I mean, he does have Oliver and Eve who do show up to help him out, but for the most part, Mark's kind of on his own in this fight. This is do or die. If he can't stop Conquest, it's it. There's nothing else. Earth has nobody else to go to, and they just barely. They haven't even really recovered from the Invincible War. So they're not in any kind of shape to take this guy on. So it really felt like the stakes are pretty high in this fight. And it was brutal. And I had mentioned before about how the animation, it felt like they saved a lot of their budget for this episode. There's one scene in particular. The animation throughout the episode I thought was pretty good, but it really kicks up when Invincible fights Conquest. But there's one scene in particular when Conquest knocks Invincible through this city. Again, an interesting parallel from the fight between Mark and Nolan in season one. The animation in this scene is so fluid and so well done. It's really impressive. It seems like they saved a lot of their budget for this one scene. And what I thought was really cool about it was when Oliver tries to show up to help, he's trying to catch Conquest and Invincible as they're flying around. And you see just how inexperienced he is and how it's showing. Like he can't keep up with them. He can't even catch them. Like forget about fighting. He can't even catch them. That's how you know that this fight is like shit's hitting the fan and this dude is not messing around. And we just see Mark get the shit kicked out of him. He does give pretty good though. He does give a few good hits in, but it's pretty clear that Conquest is stronger than Mark. But the difference in power between them doesn't feel that vast. It does feel like Mark is at least able to take his hits. He's able to at least land a few back. But what I really like about this fight is once Eve gets badly injured, man, Mark just goes like wild animal mode. That's when we see Mark basically just he is just trying to kill Conquest at that point. Like I got the impression throughout the fight, at least the first part of the fight, Mark is fighting like a traditional superhero. He's trying to protect the earth, he's trying to stand up for what he thinks is good, and he's trying to stop who he perceives as the villain. Again, Mark's ideology is kind of being challenged here a little bit. Then you got Conquest who shows up, and he even tells Mark at one point, I don't care about the Viltrum Empire. I just want to fight. Like, I'm glad that you pissed off my superiors because they've told me to stop you by any means necessary. And he's loving every second of it. Like, the dude is a freaking psychopath. And it's clear, like, if Mark doesn't stop him, he's going to just do what he wants to the earth. And what I love is once Eve gets taken down by Conquest, I love that Mark just snaps and he is fighting like an animal. Like he bites Conquest on the shoulder, he's headbutting him. Like he's basically fighting like an animal versus like a Viltrumite. And I love that aspect of Mark's character. And then just the way he delivers that line to Conquest when he tells him, like, I can see the future and you don't live to see tomorrow. I was like, damn, dude's about to go wild. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, that to me, that episode was just fantastic. The fight could have been a little bit shorter. There were a couple lines of dialogue that maybe could have been cut out overall, but I still loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, it was arguably like my favorite episode of the entire season. And then they set up a lot of story beats that are going to come from season four, the continuing war against the Viltrumites. The Sequids are back apparently. It seems like they're going to play a bigger role in the next season. Damien Darkblood looks like he's got some dark business brewing down in, I guess it's their version of hell. Um, Doing some kind of what looks like a transmutation circle, I guess, that he's drawing into the ground. It was cool to see his character come back because I don't think we really saw much of him after season one. I always liked Damien Darkblood's character, so I hope we get to see more of what he's going to do. I don't know who he's referring to when he says he wants to bring someone down to hell. If I had to guess, I would say Cecil, but I don't really know for sure. But yeah, I personally loved this season. I thought it was fantastic. Again, not quite as strong as season one or two. I would say season one is still the best so far, but I still think this is a great season, and it's got me genuinely interested for what's going to come next in the story. Like I want to see more of like what's going to happen in the war against the Viltrumites. I want to see Mark take on more of these villains. And the other thing that has me interested too in where this is going is the way the season ends is it shows Mark shifting his views on the world. He basically tells Oliver that, like, moving forward, if he sees somebody as a threat to the people he cares about, he won't hesitate to kill them. So we're seeing Mark's ideals change. We're seeing him grow and being willing to see the world as more morally gray, where he understands now, like, yeah, there are just going to be some villains that I'm just going to have to take out, whether I want to or not. So I think this is definitely going to set up a darker shift for his character that I'm excited to see. And I'm excited to see like how characters like Oliver and Eve play off of that. So yeah, overall, season 3 of Invincible still fantastic. I love the characters. I love the story. I love the growing cast of heroes and villains that we keep getting introduced to. And also, as a side note, I love that this world also has their own version of the Cenobites with Angstrom. He's introduced to these characters called I don't know what they're called, the technicians, I think. They're the ones that repair him. And like one of them is actually voiced by Doug Bradley, who played Pinhead from the original Hellraiser. As soon as I heard him talk, I was like, that's fucking Pinhead. As soon as I heard him talk, because he's got that very recognizable voice. Like, I was like, "God, I love this. I love the world building they're doing here. Like, all these creatures and characters they keep setting up. I really wanna see, like, where this is all gonna build towards." So, yeah, for my money, I thought that this was a fantastic season. I'm genuinely excited for season 4, and once that comes out, I'll probably give my thoughts on that as well. All right, everyone. I think that's going to conclude tonight's episode. It's good to be back. And once again, I do plan on trying to upload more episodes on a regular basis. So tune in to listen to more. If you like what you heard, I am on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time. Later.